We are the Muslim Ummah, and each day that goes by, the harder we try. In gratitude we pray to Allah. Chosen as part of the best of mankind, we spread the word of Islam. Every difficulty faced in our lives makes us realize that it's just part of Allah's plan. Feeling stronger, we take it in our stride.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to our 27th episode already. Yes, unbelievable, but indeed, 26 episodes have passed already, and we are now number 27, and we have seen quite some unbelievable facts. We have seen a lot of things that people didn't know and don't know. We have realized that Islam has spread all over the world historically to people. It has gone to people who willingly accepted Islam, not by sword, not violence, no nothing at all, but we have seen that people have accepted Islam because they wanted to. In several countries of the world, especially in Asia and in Africa, we have seen that Africa and Asia have become the continents of Islam and for Islam, and we have seen that people there accepted Islam willingly and without any issues at all. Tradespeople were, of course, and merchants were the ones who conveyed the message simply by doing their work properly, simply by being good Muslims. Let's put it that way, in simple terms. Be a good Muslim, observe the commands of Allah, do what Allah is telling you to do, and people will see you, will realize that you are different to the others, and will find out about you, and will find out that you're doing this because of Islam. And mashallah, this is a great thing, believe me, mashallah. It's an honor for people to say, I believe that what you're doing is great. How come? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? And that gives you a chance to basically give them, make da'wah, give them the message of Islam. Very simple, very easy. This one we have seen especially with the historical spread of Islam, especially, as we said, Asia, Africa, but also Europe. Now, in this part, I would like to give you a general recap, basically. This second segment that we are now finishing was a segment where the spread through modern migration and conversion took part. So here we have seen that in parts like in North America, in South America, in Australia, in New Zealand, in South Africa, in the rest of Europe, Western, Northern, and Southern Europe, we have seen that in all these countries and all these different parts of the world, Islam has been spreading through conversion, but also through migration. Now, an important point to mention here, of course, is we should not underestimate the number. Just because we're talking about a smaller number of reverts in these countries, especially in North America and in Europe, we should not underestimate that what is really happening actually there. Because 100,000 reverts in Europe, in Germany, not 100,000 actually per country, in Germany or in France or in Italy, it's not a small number if you consider that they could all do some good work, if they all do some work, of course. That's very important to see, that out of the 100,000, maybe some of them are just the ones who can do some work to give through the message and to spread the proper message of Islam. But as we said, that does not mean that you have to go around, walk around your city or your town or your village and tell people how great Islam is. Show it. Show how great Islam is. Show that you have become a better person than what you were before. A revert in Europe should always become a better person. A revert in America, should not go back in his development. In their development, they should rather show that Islam has made them better people. So that the surrounding, so that the parents, so that everybody who's close to them will realize what Islam basically is. It doesn't mean that if you preach the whole time, you tell them how great Islam is, they will rather take it from you than looking at your acts. No, it's the opposite. They look at your acts rather than your good words. So basically we have seen that spread through modern migration is still important because nowadays migration plays a big role. It always has played a certain role, but not such a big role as it plays nowadays. We have seen that in the world we have millions and millions of migrants. Most of them are Muslims. But we have also seen that just 1 million comes to Europe. And Europe is a massive continent, 27 countries of the European Union alone. So if you consider that just 1 million go to these 27 countries, let's just say, then what about, the rest? We're talking about 17, 18 million. What about all of them? They have to stay within the same continent, the same country, maybe even move from one region to the other and become refugees. So in the case of being a refugee and coming to Europe, trying to get asylum or trying to get some even work as somebody who has to flee his country because of problems, unemployment rate is too high or whatever, this of course does not support the idea of spreading Islam, because the persons who will come to Europe and will be the ones to basically implement or try to talk to people about Islam, these people will have to also show it. And it will be very difficult, I guess, for an immigrant who is trying to find work or who is trying to flee the civil war in his country. It will be rather difficult to spread Islam. They have to take care of themselves, first of all, and their families, which is not impossible, because we have seen in the time of the first hijrah that we discussed already, Muslims who had to flee their time from Arabia to go to Habasha, to go to Abyssinia, to go to Africa and seek refuge there. What did they do? They were refugees. They were refugees, and they had their problems, their issues, and they were poor. They were not rich people. So when they went to Abyssinia, they went to Africa, they did not go there because they wanted to. They had to flee because of persecution. Like nowadays, Muslims have to flee certain countries because of persecution. So they were refugees, but still, the Negus of Habasha, of Abyssinia, the ruler of Abyssinia, still saw the beauty of Islam and accepted it, and many people followed him. So it does not mean that we have to be rich, or we have to be very well educated, or we have to have a PhD or whatever. This is not the most important thing in order to spread Islam and to show the beauty of this wonderful deen. Now, as we have seen, North America, of course, migration, a country or a continent, a whole continent of immigrants, basically. The US, Canada, the same. But we have looked into the US and we have seen that most of the immigrants, the Arab immigrants, were not Christians, were actually not Muslims. They were rather Christians. And we have seen that when they entered the US, their interest was definitely not in promoting Islam, even the Muslim Arabs. The US is built on something very, very important. The Islam in the US is built on the reverts there. So that's why it is an important country to mention. Simply because nowadays the majority of Muslims in the US are not immigrants, but indigenous Muslims, African Americans, white American people who have accepted Islam. And this is now, especially between the African American community, you can see already the third, fourth, if not even fifth generation of people who grow up in Islam. And for them, it's basically just second nature. That's who they are. They're born in it, that's it. So there is basically an American Islam. We can talk of an American Islam. We can say that clearly there are American Muslims, not immigrants who have become Americans, but American Muslims, born and bred in their country. South America, we have seen in South America that in bigger countries like Brazil, Argentina, Venezuela, these countries play a role for the spread of Islam as well, which is not really known in Europe or outside of South America, because obviously when you think of South America, you think of salsa, merengue, music. You don't really think of Islam there. But as we have seen, Brazil has quite a big community of Muslims there, And again, the Arab immigrants there from Lebanon and from Syria were mainly Christians. They were not the ones who brought the Islamic element there, or at least not all of them. Some of them were Muslims, and some of them did bring the Islamic element, but most of them did not. But rather, the convert community there plays a role. Again, reverts in Brazil play a role, reverts in Argentina play a role in order to propagate Islam. We have seen that the 2 out of 3 Quran translations come from Sao Paulo, from Brazil, Sao Paulo being the city, the largest city, which also has the biggest population of Muslims. Australia and New Zealand, we have basically seen that both countries have an important Muslim immigrant population from the Balkan countries, especially Australia. New Zealand, interestingly enough, the first Muslims to migrate to New Zealand were actually Chinese gold diggers, Muslim Chinese gold diggers. And this is a unique example in that case, very unique and very different, whereas Australia received Muslims from Bosnia, Albania, Turkey. And this, of course, makes this country quite interesting again, because we know that the biggest Turkish community outside of Turkey is in Germany. And inshallah, after the break, we will follow with this interesting summary. Assalamu alaikum.
We are the Muslim Ummah, and each day that goes by, the harder we try. In gratitude we pray to Allah. Harder we try. In gratitude we pray to Allah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome back after the break. Before the break, we had a general idea. We went back to what we discussed earlier. We took a closer look again to the historical spread to Asia, Africa, and Europe. Spoke about conversion, how important the reverts are going to be for their societies and communities, and that a number does not say a lot. It does not mean anything that they are a minority within the minority, that they are a Muslim minority within the Muslims. No, they're the ones who will carry the message much, much more easily than the immigrants. Some of them might even be illegal, so they have to really survive, basically. But also we mentioned the example of the first hijrah to Abyssinia, to Africa, that these people at the time were not rich either, and they were also immigrants and refugees, basically, who had to also survive, but still, the message went through. So that does not really mean a lot. It's not really a specific aspect that we have to look at of certain people. Certain people, anyway, reverts, if you look at the stories, you will find quite some who are attracted or were attracted when they first heard the adhan. They was like, wow, what is that? This is great. That sounds fantastic. Let's look closer to it. What are these people doing? The others, for example, saw the prayer, the salah, which I found very interesting. I found the salah, the movements up and down, I found them quite interesting, and I thought, well, let me just try it. It looks interesting. It seems to be interesting, so let me just try it. So others, again, found the Arabic language very interesting and started learning Arabic, and through that one, they discovered the Quran. Others read the Quran even in another language but Arabic, and saw what a great book this was. So there are many ways how reverts come to Islam, and there are many, many aspects of how to discover Islam, basically. So before the break, we spoke about Australia and New Zealand. In Australia, we have seen that most of the people who come from Muslim countries who migrated to Australia, came originally from Bosnia, Albania, or Turkey. New Zealand, the gold diggers, the first Muslim Chinese gold diggers. That was also an interesting, unique case. South Africa, although it's on the African continent, which we have said already, a quarter of the population in the world, of the Muslim population in the world live in Africa. South Africa, or the southern part of Africa, did not really get a lot of it. South Africa itself as a country has a big community of Indian Muslims who came to the country in the 19th century, but also some Malays who were from the former colony, Dutch colony, Indonesia, Malaysia. So they influence Islam, the image and the picture of Islam in South Africa. These are the two bigger ones, of course. And then, of course, nowadays, after the fall of apartheid, we have a lot of African Muslims coming to the country and working there, especially from West, but also East Africa. So we can find bigger Nigerian communities, for example, the Nigerian community, and also Kenyan communities, and from the surrounding countries, Somalis, of course. And this, of course, alters the picture of Islam in South Africa, that it's not just an Indian religion. As we said before also, people have this idea that as soon as they identify Islam with a bigger ethnic group, then Islam is basically the one and only aspect of that group. Suddenly Islam becomes a national element of that group. So, like in South Africa, people thought before, as we said, in the townships, that basically Islam is an Indian religion. In Germany, it's a Turkish religion. In the UK, in Britain, it's a Pakistani religion. In France, it's a North African religion or Arab religion. Everywhere you go, you will find a nationalization of the deen. And it's extremely interesting because nowadays we're thinking in national borders, okay? And this is a new phenomenon because we are thinking within our nation. We're thinking of where do you come from? The question is not who are you, what are you? The question is where do you come from? And it's obviously a country that people think of. They don't think of a religion or another ethnic background or something, a national, they always think of a nationality. So again, this has influenced, of course, the way that people look to the Muslims and to Islam. So that in certain countries, it's that specific group that carries Islam, so that Islam is part of that group, so Islam is basically their religion. In America, and in North America especially, it has become a black religion, simply because there is such a big African-American community that has accepted Islam. How easy it is to, of course, classify or categorize Islam, put it in these simplification, simple rules. But that's not correct, of course, as we all know. We have looked into Europe, and we have looked into the different regions of Europe very, very shortly, of course, very briefly, because obviously the time did not permit us to go deeper into it. But we've looked into countries like Germany, France, UK, big countries of Europe, where you can find a specific type of Islam. Especially Germany has a specific Turkish type of Islam, simply because more than 3 million people in Germany are Turks, or come from Turkey originally, have Turkish roots, and live a kind of Turkish Islam. And that's what they give through, of course, the Germans. But we should not forget, more than 100 to 150,000 Germans officially have accepted Islam, but it's still not the biggest number. The biggest numbers of reverts can be found in France and in Italy. The UK, strangely enough, I must say, I was very surprised to find that, to discover that actually, that Britain does not have such a big British revert population as people might think, because Islam in Britain is quite strong, is quite spread. And you will find quite some communities in Britain where Islam has become an integral part, ethnic communities, ethnic groups, like in London especially, from all over the world. I mean, Arabs from any part of the Arab world. You will find Asians, of course, from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, but also Southeast Asians, from any part of the world, actually. You will find Bosnians, you will find Balkan Muslims, Muslims even from America. So that, of course, influences also the image and the picture of Islam in in the capital, in London. I don't know how close it would be an interesting question to find out, to get some answers to. Let's find out, example, in London, what do Londoners, specifically Londoners, not British people in general, specifically Londoners, what do they think about Islam in London? Do they consider it having a certain ethnic background? Do they put it equal with Pakistanis, also like it is in general of Britain? Or do they think it's Arabs? Because I think it depends a lot on where people live. If they live in Edgware Road, which is basically mainly Arab-owned, and the shops are all Arab-owned there, so there they would say, of course, yes, it's Arabs. It's an Arabic thing. It's something that belongs to the Arabs. In other parts, in East London, for example, people would say, oh, it's something that belongs to the Bengalis, Bangladeshi Islam. In other parts, you would say it's Pakistani. So I think it has a little bit to do with where you live and how open-minded you are. How open-minded you are looking into the way that you live your life. We have also seen that in other parts of Europe, like in the south of Europe, especially where Islam was an integral part before, like in Spain and in Portugal, it played an important role. We have seen that nowadays it plays a smaller role, of course, but still, in Spain we can find quite a number of reverts who will be responsible for the spread of Islam also in this country, of course, in Spain, and are responsible for it. Many of them go back to their roots and discover that they had in the past, they used to have somebody who was a Muslim. So that's an important point, I think, to realize for some of them. In Portugal, we don't have this element so much. The Muslim population in Portugal is quite small, not even 1%. In Italy, it's a bit bigger, but not extremely big. It's like 1.4% around. But in Italy, we find a big number of reverts. A massive number of reverts, and that influences the image of Islam in Italy much more, I think, than the immigrants who come to Italy, who mainly come from North Africa, or maybe some Somalis in between as well. In Greece, we do not really have a big phenomenon of reverts. Greek reverts are either hiding, or if at all, then they don't live in that country. I know myself quite some Greek reverts who live outside of Greece, as myself. And in Greece, you will not be able to find a lot. There is a very, very, very tiny, small community of Greek Muslims who, I don't know if I can call it community, who actually, try to survive, especially in Athens. It is very, very difficult to find literature in Greek, whereas there is enough literature in English, in French, in German, in Spanish, in the other languages. And this, of course, also affects the da'wah and the spread of Islam within the country. But seeing that there are not enough reverts, who is going to translate the stuff into Greek, of course? This is where the Italians, of course, are more advanced. The French, even the British, are more advanced than the Greeks, for example. So all this gives us an idea. Islam spread in different ways. Islam is there where it is now due to different factors, not only because of migration, not only because of conversion, not only because from outside people brought Islam in, whole tribes accepted it, or people saw what Islam was, whole nations accepted it. So that is all part of it. We see different ways, as even reverts nowadays individually, discover Islam on individual basis. That's also how nations and tribes discovered Islam in continents like in Africa and in Asia, as we have seen. The question is now, what is the future of Islam in the modern world? That's what we're living in. We're living in the modern world. We have seen the future from the history. Let's see what happened to Islam after it was in a certain country, in a certain area, in a certain region, how it spread, how it went to certain countries, how it went to certain individuals. But now, what is the future of Islam in the modern world? What do we expect as Muslims? What do the non-Muslims expect? And what are we expected of doing? Now, I think we have to look quite deep into the ways that we perform, or the ways that we live our Islam. We have still quite some Muslims in the world who don't even know the basis of Islam. And I think they would have to learn a lot, as we all have to learn still a lot. But the basis is basis. That's something that we all need to know. And I'm not talking about necessarily the spreading Islam, making da'wah. I'm not talking about this one. Making da'wah, you make automatically da'wah with performing your 5 daily prayers, salawat. So if you do that already, that's part of da'wah as well, as we have seen. That's what the traders and merchants did as well. They might not have known a lot about Islam, but they did know enough to perform basically 5 salawat and show people what Islam is all about. So we have quite a big job ahead of us. I'm hoping that it has opened a little bit your eyes here, and that inshallah in the future we will be better Muslims, also for ourselves, but also for our surrounding. Jazakumullahu khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
We are the Muslim Ummah, and each day that goes by, the harder we try. In gratitude we pray to Allah. Chosen as part of the best of mankind, we spread the word of Islam. Every difficulty faced in our lives makes us realize that it's just part of Allah's plan. Feeling stronger, we take it in our stride. We are the Muslim Ummah, and each day that goes by, the harder we try. In gratitude we pray to Allah. Chosen as part of the best of mankind, we spread the word of Islam. Every difficulty faced in our life